Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have an almost supernatural ability to make you question your own reality without you even realizing it's happening? They don't attack you directly. They don't openly criticize. They simply plant seeds of doubt, confusion, and self-blame so skillfully that you end up wondering if you're the problem. And before you know it, you're apologizing for things you never did, defending yourself against accusations that make no sense, and walking on eggshells in your own life. Now imagine if you could see these games for what they truly are. That's where the point lies. When you begin to recognize the toxic games narcissists play, something profound shifts in your perception. You start to see that what you thought was love, friendship, or care was actually a carefully orchestrated psychological manipulation designed to keep you trapped in their emotional web. But here's a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. These games are not random acts of cruelty. They are systematic patterns rooted in what Carl Jung called the shadow, the dark, unconscious aspects of the psyche that narcissists refuse to acknowledge in themselves. Jung said, "Through pride, we are deceived." But deep down, below the surface, the shadow waits. And nowhere is this more evident than in narcissistic behavior. The narcissist's entire existence revolves around maintaining a false image of superiority while projecting their own inadequacies onto others. They cannot face their shadow, so they make you carry it. You have been conditioned to believe that difficult people are just misunderstood, that toxic behavior stems from pain, that if you just love them enough, show them enough patience, give them enough understanding, they will change. But this is the first trap. Your empathy becomes their weapon. Your compassion becomes their playground. Because while you're trying to heal them, they're systematically destroying your sense of self. Do you know why narcissists are so skilled at these games? Because they've been playing them their entire lives. Every interaction is a power struggle. Every conversation is an opportunity to establish dominance. Every relationship is a chance to secure what Jung called narcissistic supply, the constant validation, attention, and emotional energy they need to maintain their fragile ego. But you don't see this initially because they don't start with the obvious moves. They begin with subtlety. They test your boundaries with small infractions. They gauge your reactions to minor manipulations. They study your triggers, your insecurities, your desires to be loved and accepted. And once they have this map of your psychological landscape, the real games begin. The most dangerous aspect of narcissistic manipulation is that it's designed to make you doubt your own perceptions. Jung understood that our psychological well-being depends on our ability to trust our inner knowing, our intuitive sense of what's real and what's not. But narcissists systematically attack this foundation, making you question not just their behavior, but your own sanity. And here's the cruelest point. The more intelligent and empathetic you are, the easier you are to manipulate. Because you have the capacity to see multiple perspectives, to make excuses for bad behavior, to rationalize the irrational. Your psychological sophistication becomes your weakness in their hands. Carl Jung spent his life studying the human psyche, and one of his most profound insights was about projection, the unconscious mechanism through which people attribute their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to others. But when it comes to narcissists, projection isn't just an unconscious defense mechanism, it's a deliberate weapon. The narcissist lives in what Jung would call a state of psychological inflation, a grandiose identification with an idealized self-image that must be protected at all costs. They cannot tolerate any information that contradicts this false self, so they must constantly project their own darkness onto others, and this is where you come in. You become the repository for everything they cannot accept about themselves. Their selfishness becomes your inconsideration. Their cruelty becomes your sensitivity. Their manipulation becomes your paranoia. Their inadequacy becomes your failure. And the most insidious part is that they do this so skillfully, so consistently, that you begin to believe it. Let's examine the 7 toxic games they play, because recognizing these patterns is the first step toward psychological freedom. Game 1. The blame shift. Nothing is ever their fault. When confronted with their behavior, they immediately redirect attention to your supposed shortcomings. I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't made me angry. You're too sensitive. You always overreact. They turn every accountability conversation into an attack on your character. Game 2. The guilt trip. They weaponize your conscience against you. They remind you of everything they've done for you, how much they've sacrificed, how ungrateful you are. They make you feel like you owe them your peace, your boundaries, your very sense of self. Jung said that guilt is often the shadow's attempt to maintain control, and narcissists are masters at using your shadow, your fear of being selfish or uncaring, against you. Game 3. The silent treatment. When you don't comply with their demands, they punish you with emotional withdrawal. But this isn't the conscious unavailability we discussed in previous videos. This is calculated cruelty designed to make you desperate for their attention. They know that humans are wired for connection, and they exploit this biological need to break down your resistance. Game 4. The triangulation. They bring third parties into your relationship to create jealousy, competition, and insecurity. They compare you to others, flirt in front of you, or share intimate details of your relationship with outsiders. This serves multiple purposes. It keeps you off balance, competing for their attention, and questioning your own worth. Game 5. The gaslighting. Perhaps the most destructive game of all. They systematically distort reality, deny events that clearly happened, and make you question your own memory and perception. They say things like, "That never happened," "You're imagining things," or "You're crazy." Jung understood that our sanity depends on the integrity of our inner world, and gaslighting is a direct attack on this foundation. Game 6. The love bombing and devaluation cycle. They shower you with excessive attention, gifts, and affection in the beginning, making you feel like you found your soulmate. But once you're hooked, the devaluation begins. They become critical, distant, and cruel. Then, just when you're about to leave, they love bomb again, making you believe the good times are coming back. This creates what psychologists call trauma bonding, an addictive cycle that keeps you trapped. Game 7. The victim role. When all else fails, they flip the script and make themselves the victim. No matter what they've done to you, they somehow become the injured party. They cry, they rage, they threaten self-harm. They tell everyone how badly you've treated them. This is perhaps their most powerful game because it recruits others to their cause and makes you look like the aggressor. But here's what Jung would want you to understand. These games only work because they exploit your unconscious patterns. Your need to be loved triggers your willingness to accept blame. Your fear of abandonment makes you tolerate the silent treatment. Your desire to help makes you fall for the victim act. The narcissist doesn't create these vulnerabilities. They simply exploit the ones that already exist. And this brings us to the most important question. How do you stop playing? How do you break free from games you didn't even know you were playing? The answer lies not in trying to change them, that's impossible, but in transforming your own psychological patterns. It's about what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating your shadow, of no longer needing external validation to feel complete. But this transformation requires something most people aren't prepared for. The willingness to be disliked, misunderstood, and abandoned by those who only valued you for what you could provide. Are you ready for that level of psychological sovereignty? Because that's what we'll explore next. The path to freedom from narcissistic manipulation begins with a brutal recognition. you have been complicit in your own imprisonment. This isn't about self-blame, it's about self-responsibility. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your unconscious patterns, your unhealed wounds, your desperate need for approval, these are the very things that made you vulnerable to these games in the first place. But here's the liberating truth. Once you see the patterns, you can break them. Once you understand the games, you can refuse to play. Once you recognize your own psychological triggers, you can heal them. This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole and complete. Step 1. Stop defending yourself. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive but powerful move you can make. When someone accuses you of something you didn't do, your first instinct is to defend, explain, justify. But with narcissists, your defense becomes their ammunition. Every explanation you offer gives them more material to twist and use against you. Instead, try responses like, "I see it differently. That's your perspective," or simply silence. Watch how this changes the dynamic. Without your defensive energy to feed on, their attacks lose power. Step 2. Trust your inner knowing. Jung believed that each person has access to what he called inner wisdom, an intuitive understanding of what's true and what's not. But narcissistic manipulation is designed to disconnect you from this inner compass. Start paying attention to how you feel in their presence. Does your body tense up? Do you feel confused, drained, or on edge? These are not coincidences. They're your psyche warning you about toxic energy. Your body often knows what your mind hasn't yet accepted. Step 3. Document everything. Gaslighting works by making you doubt your own memory and perception. Counter this by keeping a private record of conversations, incidents, and patterns of behavior. This isn't about building a legal case. It's about maintaining your grip on reality. When they say, "That never happened," you'll have proof that it did. When they claim you're too sensitive or overreacting, you'll have evidence of their actual behavior. Step 4. Set and maintain boundaries. But here's the crucial part. Don't explain your boundaries. Don't justify them. Don't negotiate them. Simply state them and enforce them. I don't discuss my personal life with you anymore. I'm not available for late-night crisis calls. I won't tolerate being spoken to that way. When you explain boundaries to narcissists, you're giving them a roadmap to manipulate you around them. Your boundaries don't need their approval or understanding. Step 5. Expect escalation. When you stop playing their games, narcissists don't just give up and go away. They escalate. They increase the intensity of their manipulation. They might rage, threaten, play victim, or recruit others to their cause. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, the period of intense difficulty that comes before transformation. This escalation is actually a good sign. It means your boundaries are working, and they're desperate to regain control. Step 6. Prepare for smear campaigns. When narcissists can't control you anymore, they often try to control how others see you. They'll tell anyone who will listen about how crazy, mean, or ungrateful you are. They'll twist every story, exaggerate every conflict, and present themselves as the innocent victim of your abuse. This is painful, but it's also revealing. Watch who believes their version without asking for yours. These people are showing you their true character. Step 7. Focus on your own shadow work. This is where Jung's wisdom becomes essential. You must examine your own unconscious patterns that made you vulnerable to manipulation in the first place. Do you have an excessive need to be liked? Are you terrified of being alone? Do you equate love with suffering? Do you feel responsible for other people's emotions? These are shadow aspects that need integration. Work with a therapist, journal, meditate. Do whatever it takes to understand and heal these patterns. The transformation process is not comfortable. Jung warned that individuation requires the courage to be oneself, which means the courage to be misunderstood. You will feel guilty for setting boundaries. You will wonder if you're being too harsh. You will miss the intensity of the toxic relationship, mistaking drama for passion. Your nervous system, accustomed to chaos, will feel uncomfortable with peace. But something profound begins to happen as you continue this work. You start to trust yourself again. You stop apologizing for things you didn't do. You no longer feel responsible for other people's emotions. You become comfortable with being disliked by those who only valued you for what you could provide. This is psychological sovereignty, the state of being whole and complete within yourself. And here's what narcissists fear most about your transformation. When you stop needing their validation, their power over you evaporates. When you stop reacting to their provocations, their games become pointless. When you stop explaining yourself, they lose their ability to confuse and manipulate you. Your indifference becomes their kryptonite. But the most important shift happens internally. You begin to see that what you thought was love was actually addiction. What you called loyalty was actually trauma bonding. What you believed was commitment was actually fear of abandonment. And with this recognition comes freedom, not just from them, but from the unconscious patterns that made you vulnerable in the first place. This is the path Jung wrote about, the journey from unconscious reactivity to conscious choice, from external validation to internal completion, from psychological fragmentation to wholeness. It's not easy, but it's the only path to genuine freedom. When you finally break free from narcissistic manipulation, something extraordinary happens. First comes the silence, not the punishing silence of the narcissist's games, but the healing silence of your own inner peace. The constant noise of their chaos, their demands, their emotional terrorism finally stops, and in that silence, you begin to remember who you were before they convinced you that you were broken. You stop walking on eggshells in your own life. You stop apologizing for existing, for having needs, for taking up space. You stop explaining yourself to people who twist your words anyway. You start trusting your own perceptions again, your own feelings, your own truth. The confidence they systematically destroyed begins to rebuild, stronger and more authentic than before. Carl Jung understood that true healing comes through integration, not by denying the dark experiences, but by transforming them into wisdom. Your experience with narcissistic abuse, as painful as it was, becomes your teacher. You develop an almost supernatural ability to spot manipulation tactics. You become immune to guilt trips, gaslighting, and emotional blackmail. You can see through false charm and love bombing instantly. But more importantly, you become whole. You no longer need external validation to feel worthy. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy or chaos for passion. You attract healthier people because you're no longer broadcasting the unconscious signals that drew predators to you. Your relationships become based on genuine connection rather than trauma bonding. You discover what Jung called the authentic self. Not the people-pleasing mask you wore to avoid abandonment, not the hyper-vigilant warrior you became to survive abuse, but the integrated, whole person you were always meant to be. You find peace in solitude. You feel comfortable with your own company. You no longer fear being alone because you've learned the difference between loneliness and solitude. The people who truly love you will celebrate this transformation. They'll respect your boundaries, appreciate your authenticity, and support your growth. But others will feel threatened by your newfound strength. They'll call you cold, selfish, or changed. And you know what? You'll find that their opinion no longer matters to you. This is perhaps the greatest victory of all, the ability to be misunderstood without needing to correct every misperception. Jung said that the goal of individuation is not to become perfect, but to become whole. And wholeness includes the capacity to say no without guilt, to trust yourself without external validation, and to walk away from anything that doesn't honor your truth. This is the rebirth that comes after surviving narcissistic abuse, not just healing from what was done to you, but transforming into someone who can never be manipulated in the same way again. You become what Jung called a self-possessed person, someone who belongs to themselves first, who knows their own worth, who cannot be controlled by others' emotions or manipulated by their games. This is true psychological freedom. Today, we learned from Carl Jung that recognizing toxic manipulation patterns is the first step toward psychological sovereignty, and that true healing comes not from changing others, but from integrating our own shadows and becoming whole within ourselves. The 7 games we've explored, the blame shift, the guilt trip, the silent treatment, triangulation, gaslighting, the love bomb and devaluation cycle, and the victim role, are not just tactics used by narcissists. They're patterns that reveal our own unconscious vulnerabilities, our unhealed wounds, our desperate need for external validation. But here's the profound truth Jung would want you to understand. Your experience with these toxic games, as painful as it may have been, is also your path to liberation. Every manipulation tactic that was used against you becomes a teacher, showing you where you need to strengthen your boundaries, heal your wounds, and trust your inner knowing. The narcissist's greatest fear is your indifference, your ability to remain unmoved by their drama, unaffected by their manipulations, and uninterested in their games. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding their system. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving them ammunition. When you stop caring about their opinion of you, their power over you disappears completely. If these insights sparked a moment of clarity for you, hit the like button to share this wisdom with others who might need to see it. The more people who understand these patterns, the less power narcissistic manipulation has in our world. Subscribe to join our community, where we dive deeper into life-changing ideas every week. Explore more ideas that transform how we see ourselves and the world. We're building a community of people committed to psychological growth, authentic relationships, and conscious living. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, write "I choose my truth" if you're ready to stop playing games that compromise your authenticity. Let's see how many of you are prepared to embrace the discomfort of being misunderstood in service of being genuine. And remember, if you're in the process of breaking free from toxic patterns and reclaiming your psychological sovereignty, the journey isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect, not manipulation. You deserve to trust your own perceptions. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you can provide. Until we meet again, carry these insights forward. Let Jung's wisdom remind us, the path to freedom always leads through the courage to face our shadows, integrate our wounds, and choose wholeness over the familiar patterns that once kept us trapped. Keep watching our next video where we'll explore why strong people attract toxic partners, the shadow psychology of relationships. You won't want to miss it. See you there. May you find our videos not only educational, but also inspirational, and hopefully, ultimately, transformational. The deeper the journey, the richer the life. See you next time.